Paris Perspective.
In this edition of Paris Perspective, we look into the ongoing polemic of energy transition, the future of France's atomic energy grid, and how the old bogeyman of nuclear energy is being eco-washed, as President Macron extols the virtues of a nuclear renaissance and a €60 billion investment in the sector. Now, this all comes at a time when the world needs to embrace renewables while bearing the brunt of a global energy crisis, catalysed, of course, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the European struggle to wean itself off Moscow's gas. Now, today, I'm joined in studio by Yves Marignac, who's an award-winning nuclear safety expert and head of the Nuclear and Fossil Energies Unit of the Negawatt Institute. Yves, you're very welcome to Paris Perspective today.
Hello.
Now, let's first and foremost tell us about Negawatt.
Well, Negawatt is a group of experts that has started working more than 20 years ago and, got some success in the French energy debate through the regular publication of energy transition scenarios and proposals for policies and measures. And our approach is based really on a very kind of consistent step-by-step change in the energy system, which starts with what we call energy sufficiency.
Yes.
That about energy services, dealing with the size, the nature, the priorities in what we cook, travels we do, how many square meters of surfaces we have, and so on.
Yeah.
Then efficiency, which is about improving technologies to reduce energy losses all around, and then a priority to renewables, because we think that on the long term, renewables, because they are based on natural flows and not exhausting geological stocks, are intrinsically more sustainable than fossil fuels because of climate change and nuclear power because of its risks.
And I mean, this is all a very, a very political debate, and that indeed you've been a key player in guiding this public debate on energy transition here in France. Now, as France is the second biggest producer of nuclear energy in the world after the United States, of course, the big feather in the cap of the French administration is COP21. How is France actually doing?
Not that well. But first of all, I want to emphasize how political it needs to be. Yeah. Because if we change anything in the energy system, because the energy system is framing our economy, is framing our lifestyles, then we change things that have to be discussed politically. France is kind of sitting on the asset of a low power, a low level of carbon in its electric system, and because it stands at a lower level of emissions than other countries, it seems to reduce the pressure on the need to further decrease emissions, because we are far from the level we should be. We are far from getting to carbon neutrality, zero emissions by 2050. So, the nuclear heritage seems to work somehow like a lock-in to further changes, a lock-in to further implementation of sufficiency, a lock-in to strong development of renewables. Just two information. By 2020, France was the only country in the European Union, including the United Kingdom, that had taken objectives for the share of renewables in final energy consumption. France was the only country in the European Union to miss its own objective of development of renewables. And when it comes to sufficiency, the government really changed its mind last year due to the energy crisis, but no longer than 2 years ago, the French President Macron was comparing energy sufficiency to the Amish society, just to discard any policy of that kind. So we really need to change the framework, change the way we think energy policy, and the kind of addiction to nuclear power that has framed energy policy for long is still there. And yeah.
And that, I mean, it's very interesting there that you're saying that President Macron was almost mocking energy transition, saying you're going to be like the Amish. But indeed, when he was on the campaign trail this time last year in Belfort, which is in eastern France, old coal mining areas, Macron promised a nuclear renaissance, 6 new reactors, the rolling out of these small SMR-type reactors, and extending the lifespan of the existing reactors, of which there are 56 in various levels of repair and all that. So this was a big political statement. But what exactly is he talking about when we see these 3 projects that he's putting out there and rolling them out for 60 billion euro of investment?
Yeah. Well, 60 billion is only for the new EPR reactors. I mean, you have to add on top of that the cost of life extension and the cost of potential other reactors like SMRs. What is striking with this speech, which was not a candidate speech. I mean, it was an official speech as an incumbent president, which turned its back to its promises from the previous campaign, when he said he would stick to the objective of reducing French dependency on nuclear power. First of all, it's interesting to note that this speech took place just a few days before the invasion of Ukraine, which obviously completely changed our energy landscape. And it's really striking that there's no change in the plan to take into account this return of experience. And on the contrary, I mean, this winter, although the energy crisis is more acute in France because of the failure of the nuclear fleet and the 10th winter late of the EPR being built in Flamanville. I mean, the conclusion that is driven from that is that we need more nuclear power and not less, which is kind of paradoxical. And the industry is in such a bad shape that the chair of the French safety authorities said it can't meet the objectives set by the president in a safe way without a Marshall Plan. So we are faced with the evidence of a kind of failure from an energetic point of view and an industrial point of view, but the decision is that we need more. And that is what President Macron said. So we're bracing for new reactors. We are bracing for life extension. That won't actually come in the very short term. I mean, life extension is something that will change the trajectory between the 30s and 40s, and the new reactors won't come in line before 2035 at the very earliest. Yeah. So it's also a policy and a speech that drives us away from short-term priorities and from actions like sufficiency and renewables that could deliver much faster. And maybe the last point to note is that when he made that speech, President Macron said that no expert thinks 100% renewables is possible in France. And he said that although scenarios like the one by Negawatt show it is possible, but also official scenarios by RT, which is a grid, the electric grid operator, or ADEME, which is the French agency for energy transition. I mean, they have, and they delivered 100% renewable scenarios to the president, which was just in denial of this alternative.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, you are drawing in. It's a very political hot potato here. And recently, at the beginning of this month, Macron kind of came under Well, it came under criticism because he chaired this Council on Nuclear Policy on the 3rd of February, and it caused a row with the opposition because there is a public debate, as we mentioned earlier, that is, that is still ongoing, and this is all on the future of France's energy and renewables and energy sustainability. But a colleague of yours who I was talking to said, "Oh well, the government is undercutting debate, and this has been happening since the 1970s." So you are very involved in this public debate. Is it purely cosmetic for the government?
Oh, yeah, it is. And unfortunately, that's not new. I often say that French nuclear power is too weak to dare committing to a real democratic debate, but too strong to have to do it. And I mean, we've seen that many times for decades, and we see it again, because the reality is that, 1 year on, almost day to day after the president committed to that nuclear renaissance plan, and dreaming himself obviously as a kind of new de Gaulle, starting a new program like in the 70s and bringing back French greatness through nuclear power. I mean, the reality is that everything is against the success of such a plan, because the industry is crippled, because renewables enjoy a much better, a much stronger economic and industrial dynamics, because the energy crisis brings sufficiency on the agenda. So the president and the government are kind of struggling against time to create fait accompli.
Yes.
And kind of steal the future. So that comes with a bill in the parliament to accelerate the development of new nuclear plants.
Yeah. It's a bureaucracy bill. That's what they're calling it. It's just to facilitate the actual speeding up of it.
It won't actually accelerate anything from a concrete perspective, because the time needed for engineering and detailed design and so on and building won't change.
At least a decade.
It creates like administrative and political steps again to create fait accompli. Then we had this Council of Nuclear Policy, who took very strong decisions, especially one which is very worrying, to cut the French Institute for Radio Protection and Nuclear Safety into pieces and put the nuclear expertise under the control of the French Nuclear Safety Authority. So getting back from the old and very crucial principle of separating the evaluation and decision-making for nuclear safety. So we have this plan. We have a project to take some of the livret
the savings. Yes, the savings.
Like the most popular French savings.
Sure,
to use part of it when it's normally meant for social housing, to use part of it to finance new reactors. So the government is really trying to find every bit and pieces to make it more feasible against the reality and against time. And yes, it is killing the debate that we need when you think of the kind of commitment that it represents over one or more century to remain exposed to the risks that come with nuclear facilities.
And that brings me to my next question. I mean, EDF, who are the French electricity provider, now it's all got to do with safety. I mean, they're working on building extra refrigerated pools. These are fuel cooling pools in a place called La Hague, which is up in Normandy, up near Cherbourg. And they said that, as it stands at the moment, they're almost at capacity, and they reckon they could be saturated by the year 2030. Now, this is only 7 years down the line. They're looking for over $1 billion of investment to create more pools. Now, when you think about pools, cooling pools, before these things can be either disposed of or whatever. It really brings you back to the nightmare scenarios of the 1970s. I mean, what is the ecological impact of this? And is this just a signal that France is going to bulldoze its way through with nuclear energy anyway?
Well, first of all, spent fuel pools are possibly the weakest point in the whole nuclear chain when it comes to safety and the risk of major accident. A major accident on a pool like those in La Hague could be far much worse than an accident even like we've seen in Chernobyl or Fukushima. So, I mean, one has to have in mind the kind of issue at stake. Then, I mean, French nuclear policy has been based on a kind of myth of reusing nuclear materials through reprocessing, which means we shouldn't have spent nuclear fuel piling up because it should be reprocessed and reused, and we shouldn't have reprocessed uranium and plutonium that arise from reprocessing piling up. The current situation is that we have spent nuclear fuel piling up, especially the fuel that is called MOX fuel, and that comes from a first reuse and is heavily charged in plutonium and warmer and I mean much more problematic than the initial fuel. So we have pools. We have a clear risk of saturation of the pools. We have reprocessed uranium piling up, and this reprocessed uranium used to be sent in Russia to be reprocessed. So you can see the kind of geopolitical weakness that comes also with that policy. And plutonium is also piling up. I mean, when we started the policy of reusing plutonium, like almost 40 years ago, I mean, our civilian plutonium stock was practically nil. We now have more than 80 tons, and it raises by at least 1 ton per year, even though the policy is that we actually reuse as much as we separate. And plutonium storage capacities are also saturated. So the French Safety Authority has just granted Orano, which is running the La Hague plant, the right to start storing plutonium in some parts of the plant that were not meant initially for such storage. So, I mean, the whole system is kind of running
to stand still,
behind a myth of complete recycling, but it cracks from everywhere.
Well, I mean, I think it's 40% of France's reactors at the moment use MOX. I mean, EDF, on their PR side is saying, oh, no, we're still going to be able to send our spent fuel to Russia. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen very soon. So, I mean, the other thing is, I believe in eastern France, the French, or France is considering this plan. It's called the CGO.
CGO, that's the name plan of the plan for geological disposal.
Exactly. So it's putting it in a seam of clay that's over in eastern France. And I mean, this is to put it underground, 500 meters. First and foremost, is that deep enough? But how do the local residents take to this as being singled out for like, oh, well, this is going to be all part of our sustainability here?
First of all, I mean, I don't know if 500 meters is enough. I mean, it's more a matter of the quality of the geological rocks to maintain containment, and I mean we need that kind of option because I mean the nuclear waste we're talking about are highly radioactive and for a long time, which means one needs to aim for so-called passive safety, which is a state in the long term when I mean we can't escape the fact that at some point we will forget and we will not manage this again anymore. So passive safety is meant to keep it safe once we have forgotten. And I mean, there's no better option to get to that level of safety than hundreds of meters of geological rock. But I mean, we might find a way to make it feasible and safe from a technical perspective, but it won't be from an ethical perspective anyway, because I mean, it's a burden that we transfer to future generation, whatever happens. I mean, the current plan for the existing reactors is that the waste, the last waste, should get down by the middle of next century. And if we start new reactors, I mean, the plan will be to get down by 2200 something. So, I mean, the local residents, I mean, they are faced with this burden and they feel trapped because, I mean, they were promised in the beginning that it was only for research. They were promised in the beginning that there would be research in another site, in another kind of geological structure. That didn't happen. They were promised that the government would commit to reversibility, which means that, which was understood at least as we could take the waste back and start a new project of another type in another place at any time. And that is not what is prepared. So, yeah, local residents, I mean, on one hand, they are happy with the economic income that comes, obviously, with that project. But on the other hand, they really feel trapped. And part of the local population is struggling very hard, and it's getting violent on the ground against this plan.
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head here, that this is really something that the government is looking that is going to be so long term. We're talking centuries that will keep on being used and reused and reused. So, I mean, Yves, today I think we should try and wrap up our conversation with a little bit of positive news. I mean, you know, we're talking about nuclear. We're talking about the kind of the catch-22 and then these long processes, which obviously are going to have a massive impact on future generations. But again, you specialize in energy sufficiency. Now, it would appear, or would it appear, that the message is getting through to people about being, you know, the transition of energy and being sufficient with energy, because we were warned about power outages and power cuts this winter, but that never happened. So was that thanks to us for being good citizens? I mean, was that directly due to people consuming less energy and getting the big picture?
Yeah. Well, one has to take into account that it was a warm winter, which obviously helps, especially with the high level of dependency of French electric consumption to bad electric heating that is wasteful, very common in buildings. There are also, I mean, part of the reduction, like 10% reduction in gas and electricity consumption. So that is something. Part of the reduction, and that those 10% are taking into account the climate smoothness. Part of it came from unchosen sufficiency, like, you know, people not being able to pay for the energy bill anymore. But there was also a clear sign of positive sufficiency of people choosing to turn the heating a bit down, to drive less when it comes to fuel, to make small changes. And I think this shows that when people understand that we are faced with a kind of structural crisis, be it the climate urgency, of course, but also energy security, sovereignty issues. When people understand that it is a structural crisis, they understand the interests and the benefits from sufficiency. And I think this, like short-term experience really showed that people are much more ready to changes in consumption patterns than policymakers tend to think. And yeah, when talking to people in the government or administration, I often have the feeling that they are they are lagging behind the understanding by the population of the kind of systemic change that we need, that we could implement, and that would provide a lot of benefits.
Interesting. The people are getting the message, but the politicians have yet to grasp it. That's quite interesting. Yves Marignac, thank you very much for joining me on Paris Perspective today. And thank you for checking in with us here. And you can get all of our previous editions of Paris Perspective on rfienglish.com/podcast, and indeed wherever you get your podcasts. For me, David Coffey, have a great day. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time.